Guess who now has canning jars now? Yes, Azure Standard now has their own line of canning jars, and I'm going to be reviewing them for you today, canning some apples, also from Azure Standard. Hey everyone, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, we talk all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective, as well as the grit side, talking about, more of the homesteading, canning, all the prepper, pantry type things. So if that is your jam, then be sure to subscribe to this channel, like this video, all the things. So I'm really excited that Azure Standard has come out with their own line of canning jars. I've heard about this coming down the pipeline for a while now, and I'm so thankful that they sent me these jars for review. If you remember back in 2020, canning jars were like a thing of the past because everyone was buying them up and there weren't many companies. I mean, you had just the typical ball and mason jars, that were out there. And since then, I have thankfully been seeing more companies come out with their own line, Azure being one of them. So I'm actually going to be reviewing these jars, comparing them to some ball canning jars and lids that I have on hand, talking about these jars, where they're made, and then we're going to be testing them with some apples, which is a crazy easy canning recipe, by the way. It's just a water bath can, so it's easy for you newbies to canning. So let's take a look. First of all, let's talk about where their jars are made. They do state that the actual jars are made in China, but their lids and rims are made by Superb, which is an American-based company. And I have found that in canning lately, just so you know, I've been canning for about a decade now, so I've had my share of jars. As far as jars go, I've never really had a problem with any of the ball or mason jars, but it's the lids that have definitely come out under scrutiny. So first of all, let's look at the lids. So these right here are the Superb lids, and you can see underneath they have a nice thick seal here, and they do feel good. This is one of the ball canning lids, and over the past few years, ball has been slacking with their lids. More and more people are having problems with them, which is why we need other companies to come out with things. And I'll be doing a review on other lids as well. But as far as the Superb lid goes, they look great, and they do feel a little bit thicker, like ever so slightly thicker than the ball lids. And they're very pretty as well. So you can see they have the blue ones. As far as the jars go, these are very pretty. They say Azure Canning on it. And to compare to one of my ball mason jars, I would say they feel about the same. At first, I thought when I pulled this out of the jar, it felt thinner glass, but now that I have one with me, they do feel the same. The only disadvantage is that the Azure canning jars do not have the measurements here like some of the ball jars, but not all canning jars have that. But just know, at least with these are their quart smallmouth jars that they sent me. There's no measurements. Not a deal killer, but for those of you who like the measurements, they just don't have it. So that's one thing there. But as far as this is one of the ball wide mouth, another one that's a Golden Harvest mason jar. I think this is like a Dollar General mason jar. Yeah, they all feel good. Again, the jars I've never had a problem with. It's the lids, and the rims feel good. Actually, the rims feel a little bit thicker than the ball rims as well. So a little bit thickness, and they look great. So I will say these are very pretty jars. I really like the Azure label on them. They just look really cool. And we've got them here, and now we're going to can some apples. And just to know, these are Azure Standard apples. They're organic apples. Apple season is coming up. The best time to buy their apples is in the fall. Buy them in bulk and get your canning done. I also have a amount of apples that I'm making for apple butter. That will be a different video. But today we're just doing canned apples. And the reason why I liked canned apples is because I like to use them just for like a simple apple pie or an apple crisp, because the apples are already done. I just have to drain them, dump them, mix them in whatever ingredients I have, and then put them in a pie crust or whatever I'm using them for. And it's excellent. Or you can just eat them, But these are very simple. I already have them peeled, cored, and sliced up into quarters. And as you can see, these are slightly brown because we did do these yesterday. If you're going through a lot of apples, I highly recommend one of those really nice apple core peeler slicer type things that can really help you peel them. Mine is not working at the time moment. I need to get another one. Pleasant Hill Grain has some. I will link them below. But I plan on getting one before next apple season. But in the meantime, I basically gave birth to some apple peelers. So my children actually handled all of this. They peeled them, they cored them, they sliced them. Awesome and amazing. Super thankful for them. So let's get started. All you need is you need to just make sure your jars are clean. We just wash all the jars just to make sure. And then we just start ladling this in. Typically, you can just have these where they're just kind of cook, slice them up, and put them in a pot, fill it up with water, and you basically heat it up to where they're simmering for about 10 minutes. That's slightly softening them and also giving you a hot liquid. And that's what we're going to put in our jars. So I've actually got to heat this all up, and we're going to fill up our jars, and we fill them up with apples, and then fill them up with liquid up to here, and then we water bath can them for like 15 minutes, I believe. I gotta check my directions. Super easy, but let's try these jars out. All right, so here are the apples. I actually am cheating here. I'm not going to be reheating these because I do not care right now if my apples are extremely softened. So if you want to can more soft apples, then just heat them up for about 10 minutes. But I'm going to go ahead and put these in here. I'm filling them up just basically to the rim. I like to personally leave about a ½ inch of head space from the top, just to be sure. So I'm just packing them in here as best as I can. I would not do this cold. These are room temperature apples. And because I'm not already heating these up, I'm actually going to be, I have water boiling on the stove. And that's going to be my very, very hot liquid. You never want to can cold jars in a water bath canner. I personally don't, because it runs the risk of cracking any of the jars. So these are just the apples. Now, again, these are sliced, cored, and peeled apples. Do you know I originally got one of their 40-pound boxes from Azure Standard of organic apples, and about half of this is being used for apple butter, and the rest of the half is here that you're seeing that I'm using for canned apples. But save your scraps, because you are able to use your scraps to make apple cider vinegar, raw apple cider vinegar, which I have going right now as well. So these are wonderful things and very, very easy to can. So we're just going to finish these up right here. Now here you can see is my boiling water. So this is either the water that you use to cook the apples in. If you did that, I did not. I just boiled up some water. But the point is I like to go ahead and get a hot liquid in there. And I also like to always keep my rims and my lids in a pan that's kind of simmering in water, and that just sterilizes them, and it's way easier than like having to do all of that by hand. I just throw them in there and boil it and then simmer it. So all that I'm doing here is I have this little tool that removes any air bubbles, making sure all the water is through the apples, screwing on the lids, just fingertip tight. You're not going for superhuman type strength here. But again, I'm just filling up the liquid to where it's just reaching up to the rim of the jar. So leaves about, once again, about a ½ inch of headspace from the top of the jar. Now, while I am doing all of this, I already have my canner, my water bath canner, on top of the stove, and that is already heating up. I did put water in it to go ahead and get that heated up, so I'm not waiting around for all of eternity to get that going. So here, I actually do not have a bottom to this canner. You don't ever want to place your jars directly on the bottom, so I'm just using a towel here. Again, this is just water bath canning, so it is easy. Do know if you have one of your All-American canners, they are able to be a water bath canner as well. Just know they will get extremely heavy with all of that water in it. And as you can see, I have a glass stovetop, so that's why I didn't use that. I added too much water here, so I am removing some of the water. You just need to make sure that your jars are covered by about 1 inch of water. And then we're just going to bring this up to a rolling boil, as you can see here. And this is when I start my timer. So I then cover it, and we're going to be water bath canning these for about 20 to 25 minutes. And once that is done, you're just going to put several towels down on your counter. I don't like doing these on cooling racks. It's too heavy. And then we just carefully remove our jars and we put them on the towel to then cool. And then as they start cooling, you know that wonderful, awesome effect where you start hearing the little pop, 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 pops, just to make sure that everything has sealed. And here we are. I'm thrilled to say that everything's sealed wonderfully. And I have since used these jars, these canned apples, in an apple crisp recipe that I will link for you below. And it was absolutely delicious. So with these, all you need to do now is whenever they are completely cooled, so probably the next day, you just want to label them. And I'll list my favorite labels down below as well. And then you can either remove the rims to store, or you can leave them on, but many people for long-term storage do like to remove the rims. These are more short-term storage for me, so I'm just going to leave the rims on, but that is personal preference for you. So here you go. These are wonderful jars. They all did beautifully. They've been canning beautifully, and they look beautiful on my shelf. So again, I'll be linking this below. Let me know if you have also tried out Azure Standard canning jars. They do have them in half gallon, in pints. Just watch out to make sure if they come with the lids and rims or not, because some do, some do not. So be sure to pay attention to that. Otherwise, hopefully this is a helpful video for y'all, and y'all have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you next week. Bye.